topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good to have you with us. I'm Bill Martinez. Welcome to the Bill Martinez Show. Some are calling it a great stain on America. We're talking about how another patriot gets sentenced to 22 years because of this weaponized government that America is being forced to live with. But for how long? It's becoming clear every day that the Biden administration has continued in the model of the Obama-Biden administration, using the full force of our government against we, the people, and our Constitution. During the Obama years, as you might recall, we witnessed the increasing rise of regulation nation, only to be interrupted during the Trump years. With Biden in the Oval Office, the return of regulation nation and full weaponization of our government in all three-letter agencies has become extraordinary and untenable. With us right now is Mike Hill. He's the former Florida State Legislator, former Air Force captain, Air Force Academy graduate, and proponent of election integrity. Mike Hill, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Bill, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Well, your perspective is so critical as a constitutionalist, as someone who took an oath of office like I did to serve this country, an oath that never expires. And for all veterans of this great country of ours, we are grieved by what's happening with the weaponization of our government and the disposition and flat out disregard of our constitutional rights.
Bill, what we are seeing is a blatant disregard for the rule of law. Mm-hmm. The rule of law being the ultimate law of the land, our Constitution. We are seeing a blatant disregard for it by this Biden administration, and we're seeing it on a daily basis. And what is so appalling about it all, Bill, is that they know that they are breaking the rule of law, and they have no care for it, no disregard for it, no regard mm-hmm. for it at all.
Right.
That they're disregarding everything, that they said the same oath of office that you and I said, Bill.
Exactly.
That solemnly swear to support, protect, and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But they have no regard for that oath of office at all, Bill. Mm-hmm. And I believe it is because for them, that oath of office was just a perfunctory gesture.
Right.
When instead, when you place that hand, your left hand on the Bible and raised your right hand, and you said that oath, when you swore that you would protect the Constitution, it wasn't just between you and the person administering the oath. And it wasn't just between you and those who you were going to serve. It was between you and the living God.
Exactly.
You were promising God that you were going to support and defend the Constitution, but they have no regard for that at all. And so they can break the law with impunity and not have any remorse for it at all.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Mike, it's as if that oath, as it goes to God, it connects to that light on a shining hill that John Winthrop talked about, right?
That's right. You know, and also we can go back to John Adams, Bill, who mm-hmm. made this statement that our Constitution is only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly unsuitable for any other.
Exactly.
And we are witnessing that. We are mm-hmm. witnessing right now this cabal, which was installed in office. It was not an election, in my opinion.
Right.
They were installed in office, and they have no moral compass. They have no religious background. that even though they might confess that they do, it is not on display. You will know them by their fruit.
Exactly.
You can see by their fruit
Mhm.
that this group, this cabal, this regime, which is in office right now, that is using our Department of Justice, as I like Mark Levine calls it, Department of Injustice,
Exactly.
that we are seeing right now,
Mhm.
that it is using that department to go against political opponents.
Mhm.
And that is just antithetical to everything that this nation was founded on and what has made it so great.
Well, it's nothing new. I mean, we saw this under Obama Biden when they went after Tea parties and all things conservative, right? And as you and I discussed before, I believe their interference probably did, affected probably, at least a dozen voting cycles, even to this day, because these conservative groups and Tea Party groups were not able, Mike, to, to get tax exemption that is important for them.
That's right. And because they couldn't get the tax exemption, that would mean that their members were to be open to the public, and that was intentional because any members of the Tea Party at that time, they could then be signaled out, and the IRS used to go after them to
Mhm.
perform audits on their taxes or whatever. Nobody wanted that. And so they thought that that was going to be the destruction of the Tea Party. But what they didn't understand, Bill, and what we are seeing right now, what they did not understand was that the Tea Party was just a name for a movement which
Yeah.
was taking place at that time. That movement is the spirit of America, which founded this great nation. And we have seen it rise to the occasion many times in our history. The Tea Party was just a more recent one, but
Mhm.
even after that comes the Make America Great Again movement,
Exactly.
which is again just a movement of the spirit of America, of people who want righteousness to prevail and not tyranny, as we are seeing right now.
Exactly. And the thing that I love about it is that in some ways it's apolitical. It's not about a party, but it's everything about this great American idea. And that's what most of us can, align ourselves with and support, Mike.
That's correct. It was our nation being founded on of course, our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And when we recognize those words in our Declaration,
Mhm.
that are it is self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and property, or the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, government is instituted among men, deriving their just powers by the consent of the governed. In other words, the only reason why government exists is to secure
Yeah.
our God-given rights. But that is not what we are seeing coming out of the Biden regime right now, which is a continuation, as you said, Bill, of the Obama regime. It was paused when Trump was in office, but now they've come back full force, and they've come back with a vengeance, and we are feeling it in almost every aspect of our lives today.
How critical is the election for 2024, Mike Hill?
I think is vitally critical, Bill, that
Mhm.
what we have to do, the reason why we have to get rid of the leftists, the regime that's in there now, is because they have demonstrated their disregard for the rule of law, and they will go full bore
Exactly.
even more because they don't want what happened after Obama left office and Trump came into office and started dismantling everything that they have put in place. They want to instead make sure that after them, whoever wants to attempt to dismantle it, it's going to be very difficult for them. And so that's what they're going to do in 24
Mhm.
should they steal the election again.
Well, they did that in part, heading into, as Obama was exiting the office, if you remember, Mike, he reclassified, I think, about 4,000 people in his administration and moved them into the bureaucratic administrative class of government. So they were protected. And so this was part of the problem and part of the headwind that Donald Trump faced during his 4 years as president of the United States. I mean, we were fortunate, all things considered, that he was able to accomplish on behalf of the American people the many great things, from low unemployment rates, energy independence, a border that was more secure than it ever had been, a kind of a rebirth and a stronger standing on the American stage to where our enemies began once again to fear us. And all that vapored as soon as Joe Biden came into office, almost overnight, Mike Hill.
That's right. And Bill, you described it so well when you said when Trump came into office, how things began to become prosperous again.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe a big reason for that is not so much for Trump, but what Trump did. Well, let me say it differently. What Trump did was he unleashed the power of what is the potential of what's available in America.
Right. He freed the slaves. People didn't even realize it didn't matter what color you were. We had become indentured to the administrative state in this government. And you said perfectly that he liberated, he took the handcuffs off, and he set the people free. And we know by experience and empirical evidence, people are happiest when they're working and being productive. And we were working and being productive once again, and joy came upon America, and those on the left could not stand it, Mike Hill.
That's right. Because what we were demonstrating was that we don't have to be dependent on the government.
Exactly.
In order to provide for our families, in order to prosper. And that is what they cannot stand, because the more people who are dependent on them, the more power they have. And the more power they have, the more control they have. But what Trump did was he unleashed the power that we have within us. Because as you said, Bill, man is made to work.
Exactly.
When God created man, Adam and Eve, and put them in the garden, he said, tend the garden, go to work.
Yeah.
We were made to work.
Be fruitful and multiply, right?
That's right. And we have those on the left who instead want to say, you don't have to work.
Yeah.
Just depend on us to give you what you need. You only need to exist and allow us to control your lives. And so that they want to give out these ability. They want to hand out food.
Yeah.
They want to hand out health care. They want to hand out housing. But here's the thing, Bill. First of all, it's never enough that they give you. It's never enough.
There's no joy in being dependent. A dependent class does not provide any kind of happiness or joy.
That's right. And it doesn't provide any production at all.
Exactly.
It's just consuming, and it's untenable, Bill, because eventually the consumption is going to take more of the scarce resources than what can be produced.
Yeah,
you must have more producers than you have consumers for things to continue.
We're talking with Mike Hill, the former Florida State Legislator, former Air Force captain, Air Force Academy graduate, and proponent of election integrity. Mike, in regard to our GDP, I mean, which should be quite telling. Barack Obama, who was regarded as the Black Messiah by so many, and I don't mean to be disrespectful in any regard. I'm using their words. They looked at Barack Obama as the Black Messiah. Look at him and what he thought. He believed with all his heart that the best that America could do GDP growth-wise was, less than 2%, maybe 2%. That would be the best that we could do. Donald Trump would hear nothing of that. He had visions of 5-6%. And I believe that our country could have attained these never before numbers or perceived numbers from Barack Obama and those on the left if he hadn't dealt with the resistance by Nancy Pelosi and those on the left that wanted to make sure that America would never be great, much less be great again.
That's right. Bill, you raised such an interesting point. I was once at a conference and the CEO of the Gallup poll organization was given a presentation and made this statement, and he showed us the data that whenever America's GDP is 3% or more, then the rest of the nations of the world also benefit and do better.
Exactly.
When we are
I lost you there for a moment, Michael. Michael, I'm not sure what happened to our audio.
I'm sorry. Are we?
Oh, okay. I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you there for a minute, and I was waiting for your response.
Well, let me say that response again. I was saying that I'll back up to where I was talking about the Gallup poll. The CEO of that organization was saying that whenever the United States GDP is greater than 3%, then all the nations also prosper and do better.
Yeah.
And when it's less than 3%, they're harmed. The data shows that. And so Trump was going to unleash what the human potential is when you give it the freedom to simply prosper. Well, and Trump was going to unleash that. Yes. And we saw it happening, and it was a great thing. And when he said, no, we're going to make America great again, make America first, he also, you might recall, Bill, when he was touring Europe and when he spoke before the United Nations, he said, you should also make your nation first.
Exactly.
In your own eyes. Mm-hmm. Do what was going to be what's best for your nation, just as we are. Mm-hmm. And what a great freedom that would have been. But now we have the Biden administration that instead is kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party, which wants to control nations instead of making nations free.
Exactly. Well, you see, this is all part and parcel, Mike, as you know, of the World Economic Forum. This is why they came after Trump so aggressively, because what Trump was doing, yes, making America great, but you're exactly right and astute in pointing out that it was making other nations great, because look what happened. I mean, Germany decides for a moment there, they think, oh, well, maybe we should set up some sort of relationship with Russia and get our oil or get our gas from Russia. And Donald Trump, talks to, the prime minister. So what are you thinking? You want to be beholden to the Russians? We've got plenty of natural gas. We can help you. You need to work with us so that you're not beholden and putting your citizens in danger. And, and this was across the board. This was kind of the typical response to the NATO nations that we could be better partners and better partners together, not only for Europe, but around the world.
That's right, Bill. And you'll recall President Trump also told NATO, not only can we be good economic partners with you, but you also need to start paying more of your share of this alliance. Most nations were only putting in 2 to 3% of their GDP into NATO. And here
actually was less than that, Mike. I think Germany was only putting in 1%.
Right.
And the commitment was supposed to be at least 2%.
And here we were putting in the lion's share of all that. So here are the American taxpayers bearing the burden of not only an oppressive government here in America, but also in Europe and around the world. And Trump came and said, hey, no more. You start carrying more of your own load. And they did. They raised it, not by a lot, but they at least raised it. And left more money here for us.
Exactly.
But then we come back to the Biden regime, the Biden administration, and what they do is start spending money at an astronomical level, and it's continuing. And we're seeing it, Bill, before our very eyes, with Congress now passing these continuing resolutions, spending money that we don't have, that is simply putting that burden on the backs of our children and grandchildren who are eventually going to have to pay that back.
When you have this kind of debt, it's a national security issue, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. Because when you have that kind of debt that is hanging over your head, you're unable to use those funds where it could be needed. The government is supposed to protect its borders. We're supposed to be able to protect its citizens in case we are attacked in times of war.
Exactly.
But if you have debt that is so high that you can't even afford to pay your own national defense, then it does become a security issue for us. When you see that we are unable to provide for the defense of our nation as we should because of this tremendous debt. And with all this spending of money, it causes inflation. Inflation is simply too many dollars chasing too few goods.
Exactly.
And when the government gets involved with spending those dollars, printing it out of thin air, we have this inflation. And so when inflation goes like that, it harms everyone, from going to the grocery store to buying gas for your car to clothing for your family. It's all affected. And that's what makes it such a huge national security threat.
Well, here we are. We're spending about another $5,000 to $7,000 a year per household, and then the Democrats' answer is we need more taxes. We yes, our interest rate's going up. Our interest payment now, it approximates. I mean, it's getting real close to our defense budget. I mean, think about that. To your point, how we're being compromised here. And so their answer is, oh, no problem. We'll just tax you more on top of inflation, on top of what some experts are projecting, that we will be experiencing a recession next year, Mike.
That's right. Well, what is the highest tax bracket right now, Bill? I think it's 37% is the highest tax bracket. The lowest tax bracket can be 0 up to 20% once you hit a certain threshold. So 20% to 37% is too much money for the government to take from its citizens. And how I know that, here's proof of it. Taxes should only be used for government to fund its limited enumerated functions.
Exactly.
Period. It should not be used to try and control behavior. It should not be used to try to give money to certain industries that they want to prop up, this green energy industry, with the windmills and the solar panels, and with even, I'll name a company, Tesla.
Yeah.
If Tesla had not received all that government subsidies, the company would be nowhere near where it is now.
No doubt.
Same with the windmill companies and the solar panel companies. Without government, or let me say it differently, taxpayers funding it, it would not exist.
Yeah.
And the reason they are able to do that is because they're taxing us so much.
Exactly. Well, they've spent over $5 trillion, Michael, on all this green energy. And what do they have to show for it?
Nothing.
I mean, that's pretty sad. Think all that money, and we've got some broken down windmills. We're destroying the horizon and the landscape of the eastern seaboard with all these windmills. I mean, what are the submarines and the ships going to do there on the coast? Are they going to go and use those windmills as slalom gates or something?
And Bill, those windmills and solar panels only have a life endurance of 20 years.
Yeah.
And so, and they've put up all these windmills, let's say in the past 10 years or so. And so pretty soon we're going to have to do something with all those windmills, and you just can't put more up. You're going to have to do something. But here's the thing, Bill. Over the past 15 years, let's say 15 years is when all this the left went utterly insane and started doing all the solar panels and windmills and so forth, that the amount of electricity that it has generated for our economy is around 2%. That's an abject failure.
Yes.
It is not meeting the needs of what we want. And so in the minds of those on the left, the answer is, well, then we have to do more of it.
Exactly. It's always more.
Yeah. We have to tax you more. It obviously has not been done right yet. We can do it right. We can make communism work because we're smart enough to do it right.
Yeah. Nobody else in the history of man, has been able to do it, but somehow these geniuses can, right?
That's right. And it's because they don't understand human nature. They don't understand man's desire to be free. They do not want to be controlled by you, government, or anybody else, but they think that they have the ability to be able to do that. And as you say, Bill, it has never worked in human history, and it cannot work.
Right. Well, it's an anti-God agenda, Mike Hill. That's what it is. Bottom line, just like you said, you're not the boss of me. And they're saying that to God Almighty, who designed everything. The infrastructure that we live has been established by God, not by Al Gore, not by Joe Biden or Barack Obama or anybody else, but by God Almighty himself.
That's right. That's right. And so what we are witnessing, Bill, to your very first point of what we saw happening to these political prisoners in the January 6th fake committee. Even the committee itself was fake. And what they did was they said that we are going to make sure not only that Trump will get back in office and mess up everything we're trying to put in place, not just in America, but around the world.
Right.
But anyone who supports Trump, we're going to make an example out of you to show that if you support Trump, it's going to cost you, and it's going to cost you dearly. And that's what we are seeing with this this whole thing of these political prisoners who, with this whole contrived notion of an insurrection on January 6th, when it was anything but that.
How afraid are they, Mike?
Well, I think that we are seeing that it is having an effect. It is having an effect. And even with these more recent indictments of Trump coming down, but not only Trump, but anyone who was around him.
Exactly.
The lawyers, simply because they are questioning the results of an election, simply because they're saying, hey, let's count these votes correctly. Let's count them again. Simply for saying that they are being indicted and trying to be charged under RICO violations, which is outrageous. But the whole idea is whether you get found guilty or not, the damage has already been done. You've been indicted. And so if you're going to be a conservative, if you're going to be not just with Trump, but with the whole movement of going against this cabal wanting to control your life, you go against that, it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do, Bill, is make sure that voices like you and I do not become intimidated, do not become silenced because of what is going on, but instead stand up for our God-given freedoms.
Well, the fact is, to your point, Mike Hill, is that there's more of us than them. I mean, we were just having a discussion earlier about what happened in Germany. It was only 10% that controlled 90%. And what do we have to stand on? We've got tradition. We've got God. We've got a constitution, which is our birthright as a patriot of this great nation. And that's what we can stand on. They have no empirical evidence. All they have is a lot of emotion and violence. And this is why, this is all coming to a head. And it is because of what they're creating. And I get it. Some people say, oh, Bill, I know we may be going into a revolution, but I don't want anybody to die. Well, I'll tell you what, we didn't want anybody to die, but the first revolution, a lot of people died because freedom costs. and that may be the case. We cannot control that. I pray to God that isn't the case. But you know what? Freedom costs, and what are you willing to pay for your liberty?
Oh, absolutely right, Bill. What we have to make sure is that we are willing to stand up and fight for that freedom, because freedom, as you said, is not free.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily just for us, Bill. That would be kind of selfish.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with that type of selfishness. But it's also for our children, for our families, for the rest of society. If we are going to continue to prosper, if we're going to continue to be a blessing to the rest of the world,
right,
then we must be willing to fight for that, because there are always those on the left who demand you to bow down to them and give them the power that they so desire, even though they haven't earned it.
Right. Well, Mike, with your background in the military and looking at the strategy of where we are and, coming into 2024, no doubt the vote is paramount. That has to be secured. We have to vote early. And as they would say, vote often, whatever you can do. Don't go to polling stations by yourself. Make sure friends, neighbors are registered to vote. We know that even in the religious circles, which is, astounding to me, only 50% of people who go to church on Sunday, and that includes Saturday as well, only 50% will actually register to vote. And of that 50%, about 50% of that number will actually vote. That's unacceptable. We have a country to save, and your vote is powerful, and you need to get in the mix to save this country.
Exactly, Bill. That vote is a precious thing. That is what gives us our power. Our Constitution says that the power belongs to the states and to the people.
Yes.
And our power is through that vote. We should not abdicate that power at all.
Mm-hmm.
Our power does not come from, or should not come from, as the left thinks it should, by going out in the street and causing mayhem and destruction. That is what they think is their form of power.
Right.
Those like us on the right believe our form of power comes by getting the right people in office who are going to represent our values. We're going to represent our morals. We're going to represent what we stand for, which, as you say, we are in the majority. We
exactly.
actually are. And we need to stand up. We need to exercise the power that we have by going to the voting booth. Now, what I would like to see if I were king for a day, Bill, was that there would be voting on one day, in person, on paper ballot.
Amen.
And if we could,
and we could throw a voter ID in there too, Mike.
That's right, and voter ID, and clean up the voting rolls so that we know those who are actually voting should be voting.
Right.
And that's why, Bill, we're seeing those on the left who are allowing this invasion to happen, not only across our southern border, but our northern border also.
Exactly.
This invasion that is coming in, and they are giving them identification cards. And the reason they are doing this is because with those ID cards, they can then go vote.
Because they'll send them a ballot.
Right.
Right.
This was planned and contrived by those on the left, because they saw that the demographics in America were against them. They were losing their power. And so they wanted to bring this invasion in of people, millions of people, Bill, who are coming in, who they know are the majority of them will likely go to the Democrat Party to continue giving them things that they are receiving right now.
Exactly. Well, see, this is why, Mike, and I was going to say this to you earlier, is that we need leadership to come in like a wrecking ball, almost like with, your experience in business as well, is that sometimes businesses get themselves in so much trouble that they don't know how to make the necessary cuts because they got family sacred cows, vested interest. And this is why you have, a bankruptcy attorneys who come in and it's just about saving the entity. And that's what we need. We need to have leadership who comes in and looks at all things in our government to save the government, from all its, acquired bad habits and entanglements that it has got itself into over the decades.
Bill, that's going to take quite an effort. That's going to take a yeoman's effort to
Oh,
do
without
that.
a doubt. Exactly.
And Trump tried that, but as you say, when Obama was leaving office, all those who are part of his administration, he made them civil servants, so that it's almost impossible to fire them, even for bad performance, even for not even showing up to work. It's
Right.
almost impossible to fire them. And so those people who are entrenched makes it difficult for when someone who, like Trump, who wants to make America first, and as you say, take a wrecking ball to it, and let's get it back to its foundation of where it needs to be, that it is so difficult for him to do that, because even when an edict or an executive order is issued, and by the way, an executive order only applies to the executive branch of the government. It does not apply to any other. So when an executive order is given, that there's all this pushback, not so much from the rank and file, but from the leadership within the civil service ranks who do want to keep their jobs, want to keep their positions, and are fighting back against freedom at every turn.
Exactly. Mike, I want to have you give your assessment of the GOP debate round 2. What did you make of it?
Bill, I'm going to have to admit that I intentionally did not watch it.
Okay.
And the reason why I didn't watch it is I knew it was just going to be more of the same. Yeah. It's going to be more of a vote for me why I should be president because. And I've heard it all from them before. And I know Trump made this one statement, and I tend to agree with him, that most of the people on this stage should not even be running for office.
Right.
That they really don't have the qualifications, the stamina, the know-how to be president of the United States. When you are president of the United States, that is a worldwide job. That is not just running America, even though that should be your primary focus. But we are in such a global economy, we're such a global, not one global economy, not one world government, but we are so connected, how technology is allowing us to move from one nation to another, to transport goods from one to another, that it's huge. Each decision that is made, and just because you were governor of a state, just because you were at one time a businessman, or it takes a know-how to get to that level and to be able to do it. And I don't think many on that stage are qualified to be president of the United States, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Especially where it sits right now. And I don't blame Donald Trump for not going and participating in the debate, especially the way they're engineered. I was very disappointed in the way it was moderated. I like Dana Perino, but she was very disrespectful to these people who came there. They're participating in this debate, and she was treating them like kids. And I will say this, and I'm sure you'll probably see the soundbite. One of the last questions, and she asked it to the candidates and said, write down on a piece of paper who should be voted off the island. Can you imagine? Okay. Well, Governor DeSantis, he demonstrated leadership right without hesitation. He says, I ain't doing that. And the thing is it really coalesced the rest of the people, the other candidates, except for Chris Christie. because Chris Christie, he had kind of like written something down, and Stuart Varney caught him because he acted like he didn't. And then, of course, then he had made some sort of comment that he would vote Donald Trump off the island because Donald is Donald Duck, he said. And it didn't play very well. But the bad thing about it was Dana's, proposition of asking, these candidates to vote somebody else. This isn't Survivor. I mean, what are you doing?
Right. It's where these those who are hosting a debate think that the debate belongs to them.
Exactly.
When what the debate is to be all about is to let the American people see
Exactly
who the candidates are, what their positions are, and why they should be considered. But instead, these hosts of these debates thinks it belongs to them, and that's why you would see nonsensical questions like that. And Bill, that just adds reinforcement to why I'm glad I didn't watch it, because I probably would have thrown something at the TV by then.
Well, I was tempted. I must admit, because and exactly what you just said is that the problem with these moderators, they think it's about them. It's the voter. It's about the American people who need to hear from these candidates what it's all about. What are they standing? What are their ideas? And instead of the got you questions and questions, like, oh, well, we got a small committee over here to the side and we're coming up with these questions. Wait a minute. I think it's obvious what the country needs to hear. We need to hear about immigration. We need to hear about the economy. We need to hear about energy. We need to hear about national security, Ukraine and Russia. And I don't think you need to go much further than that, frankly. Maybe China. Okay, we can talk about China, but still, a pretty short number of questions that gives you 2 hours when you break it up over what, 5-6 questions. You can pretty much get into that pretty good, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. And what you want to hear these moderators bring out, if they have that ability,
yes,
what you want to hear coming from those candidates is, what is your vision? What do you have for the nation? Mm-hmm. Without a vision, the people perish. So come forward with a vision of not only what we need to do to correct the current situation, but where are we going from here? Where are we going together? Mm-hmm. And it should be something you want to hear that is motivating, that is uplifting, that is more than just complaining about President Trump, or even complaining about the current regime, even though there's an awful lot to complain about.
And they said little about Joe Biden, Mike.
Right.
Little. I don't think his name was mentioned a dozen times, maybe not even 5.
And he's should be the reason why you were running for office, because you want to replace him.
Exactly.
So you should talk about why you want to replace him and what you're going to do once you get there. But we didn't hear very much of that. And they spend time instead either attacking each other or attacking Trump. Let's talk about the vision of where we need to go, not only for this nation, but for the world.
Well, conservative policies are solid, Mike Hill, aren't they?
That's
By
right.
comparison, I would think. I mean, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, our constitutional principles, are inalienable rights that have been given to us not by man, but by God. This is the backbone of the Republican Party and conservatives, is it not?
That's right. In that Constitution, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice. That is the second statement there in that Constitution. Establish justice. We want to do what is just, what is right. And we're not seeing that coming out of this regime right now. As you said in your opening, Bill, that they are using all the 3-letter alphabets of our government to not establish justice, but instead to establish control over people. And it won't work. It can't work, because within the breast of every person is this yearning to be free. that was put there by God, this yearning to produce, which was put there by God, and to provide for your family. And so when the government is antithetical to that, then government, you're going to lose. You cannot fight against the people. And that's why the Chinese Communist Party is in trouble right now. The same reason why Russia is in trouble, the same reason why Venezuela, Cuba is in trouble. You cannot fight against that natural spirit that God put in man and think you're going to win.
Exactly.
So those on the left, the sooner they come to that realization, the better off we will all be.
But it's not going to be an easy battle. You know, with bullies, you got to bully a bully, and you've got to meet them with an equal amount, if not more, force in order to overcome them. Mike Hill, you know that.
Well, that's right, Bill. And when you say force, you're not talking about picking up a gun and going down the street and shooting whatever.
No.
You know, we're not talking about that. What we are talking about is standing up for your God-given rights and not acquiescing to what they want you to do. Don't take this COVID jab. Don't do it. Don't wear a mask. That's what we're talking about, standing up and fighting. We just don't comply with what they are trying to force down our throats.
Exactly.
Don't buy an electric vehicle if you don't want one. You know, don't put solar panels on your house if you don't want one. You know, just don't buy. Don't comply with their control mechanisms. This whole thing about a digital currency, don't buy into it. If there's a business that says we don't accept cash, say, well, thank you very much, and go to another business.
Yeah, thank God we've got choice and we've got options. It is about liberty and it's about your free choice. Mike Hill, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. We appreciate the time. Godspeed, my friend. You take care.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me.
You got it. Our honor. Mike Hill, the former Florida State Legislator, former Air Force captain, Air Force Academy graduate, and proponent of election integrity. Thank you so much for being with us. Our thanks to Mike Hill for being a part of the show. For more information and for your participation to promote this mighty movement to return to God and to save our country, check it out, BillMartinezShow.com. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious unto you and give you peace. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great week.